Hello everyone, it's great to see you all. Today I'd like to follow up on that guided meditation and talk about this misperception of reality that we have. And how this misperception of reality causes suffering. And this misperception of reality blocks our experience of peace, contentment, love, and beauty. So it's quite a misperception to do all that, right? It's the root of suffering. So I want to get right at the root of suffering and see that suffering arises from a distorted perception. A distorted perception of how the world works, really, and how we're in relation to the world. It's a distorted perception, and from this inaccurate perception, we try to control life. We either grasp at what is pleasant, or we push away what we view as unpleasant. Right? You've all heard this. The Buddha talked about this in the Four Noble Truths and in many other places. We talked about the difference between mind-created suffering and unavoidable suffering. So we're talking about the mind-created suffering, which is most of it. It's most of it, the vast majority. So most of the suffering that we endure is mind-created. It results from this kind of a misalignment in our perception of reality at the moment we experience it. Misperception, and it's entirely unnecessary. So again, I'm not talking about the suffering that's part of life, stubbing your toe, getting ill or older, and the things that happen with that. I'm talking about this mind-created suffering. And it's a more pervasive type of suffering, and it arises from our distorted perception. So in the second noble truth, the Buddha he points to this notion that suffering emerges from a misperception of reality. He actually states that it's clinging that causes suffering. Right? That clinging is the grasping for what we want and the pushing away what we don't want. And that's basically how the Buddha always taught the cause of suffering and the path to the cessation of suffering. That clinging causes suffering. But what causes clinging? So clinging arises because of an identification with the egoic mind, right? And a belief, attachment, identification with this mind. So what causes the identification? Why do we have this identification with the mind? Right? We identify with the mind because we believe that we're separate entities that can find happiness and contentment by controlling our inner and outer experience. Right? We wouldn't try to control everything in this way if we didn't identify with this mind and we didn't believe that by controlling life that we could find happiness. So it all comes down to this misperception. So the misperception of separation, and also the misperception of permanence. That we can find something that makes us happy and it'll continue. It'll be lasting happiness because there's some permanency there. So it's misperception of permanence, which is one nature of reality, and separation. So it all kind of boils down to this misperception. And this misperception creates a discord between our subjective perceptions and the objective nature of the actual moment. Right? We fail to perceive things as they actually are or as they were. How many times have I said that in different sessions? Right? We fail to perceive things as they are. So our understanding deviates from reality. And when this happens, we suffer. So it's about seeing things as they truly are. Right? We suffer because we don't see things as they truly are. What the Buddha called the suchness of the moment, or the isness of the moment. Let's take an example of how this misperception can work. Let's take a magic show. Let's look at a magic show. Let's say you're at a magic show with an 8-year-old child. And the magician places a person in a long box and then closes the lid of the box and then proceeds to saw the box in half. Well, the perception of this act by the 8-year-old is likely shock and maybe even alarm. And they might even encourage you to call the police. Mommy, Daddy, they're sawing this person in half. We got to do something. You, on the other hand, have a different perception because you know the true reality of the situation, right? You know it's a magic trick. So this illustrates the difference between someone that perceives reality as it is versus someone that's misperceiving reality. It's a simple example, but it actually points to a much deeper truth. So when our perceptions clash with reality, this generates friction, and this friction manifests as suffering. And this sounds so straightforward when you hear it, right? But the implications of it are profound. And it really represents a radical shift in how we navigate our life. So it comes down to addressing suffering requires a shift in perspective. So instead of attributing our distress to external factors or external events, we recognize that much of our suffering comes from a misperception of reality. It's completely mind-created. Clinging, as the Buddha would say, identification with the self is another way to put it. But all of that comes down to this misperception that we're separate, and that because we're separate, we can control what's happening to this separate entity. And of course, each person interprets everything through their unique lenses of perception, right? We all have different perceptions, leading to all kinds of individual interpretations. There's lots of research that's shown that people exposed to the same events can emerge with vastly different interpretations and perceptions and conclusions. Done controlled studies where people with exactly the same environmental exposures can have diverse reactions because of different perceptions. Right? That really highlights the significant role played by our perceptions. And then in the realm of this, what we're doing here, this of spirituality and awakening to our true nature, is also very core. The Buddha called it, referred to it as Maya, or the dream state. You hear different spiritual traditions talk about, that we live in a dream state. We live in Maya. Where people navigate their lives under the influence of misperceptions. So the concept of Maya suggests that the world we perceive through our senses is not the ultimate reality, right? But a creation. It's a creation of reality created in the mind. But it's a misperception of reality. We don't see the impermanent and interconnected nature of everything, everyone and everything. It's the nature of phenomenon, this interconnectedness and impermanence. So this is really what we're doing here, is sensing into that deeper truth. And in the dream state, the Maya state, we fail to perceive things as they truly are. And we create a reality in our minds that's different from the actuality of the situation. So how could we not suffer? Right? You're trying to manipulate things, and your interpretation of how things interact is a misperception. So we each live in not only in a dream state, but an individual, very unique dream state. Right? Our dream states are all very unique. So we have varied experiences of suffering. Like not everybody suffers to the same degree and in the same ways, because our dream states, our misperceptions are all different. So this is a reoccurring theme in all different spiritual traditions. It's throughout the Buddha's teachings, it's throughout Hindu teachings, it's throughout Taoist teachings, it's throughout Christianity, Islam. It's through that theme is throughout. In particular, the more mystical, to use that word, there's nothing really mystical about it, but what's often called the mystical arm of these traditions. It's the arm that's really looking at truth and perceiving reality as it is. A misperception of self. So we see ourselves as isolated individuals, defined by this body, all these thoughts, emotions, our feeling tone. You see the illusion of this separateness. Just a misperception. So why do we have this misperception? I'm quite fascinated recently with artificial intelligence. I think it's going to make the internet look kind of insignificant in terms of its impact on society. So when I have these kind of questions, I like to have a conversation with AI just to see where it'll go. Why do humans have a misperception about reality? And it actually came up with a fairly coherent response, and it was varied. It's cultural and social conditioning. It's the survival mechanisms that we have. It's the nature of the cognitive processes. In other words, the way the brain's wired. And ChatGPT actually recognized these causes for our misperception of reality, and there were a few more in there that I can't remember in the moment. But it's basically, the Buddha really emphasized that it's a product of conditioning, and society and culture are playing a key role in shaping these perceptions about the nature of self and the world. So we can really acknowledge and challenge these misperceptions, right? Then we can really begin to kind of unravel and discard these beliefs that are rooted in ignorance, in delusion, as the Buddha would call it. So the spirituality that we're exploring here really involves exploring and understanding these fundamental, foundational beliefs about reality, about the self, and dismantling them. So we're really digging into the roots of our conclusions about selfhood and about how the world works, and rooting out these misperceptions that are not congruent with reality. So it's really a process of self-discovery. Right? As I said in the meditation, you can see the truth of your own nature, right? Because we can look inward and we can use our what's here as our kind of laboratory. Right? This is where the experiment can happen. You can't really see it looking out there, but so you see it first by looking inside. You see the true nature of the self. You see your true nature, and then you can see, this is the true nature of everyone and everything. Everything is interconnected, and everything is not self, and everything is impermanent. So this is what enlightenment is, or awakening. It's when we perceive ourselves as we truly are, we awaken to our true nature. And then we perceive the world in that same light. And that just shifts everything. It just shifts everything. When I first practiced many decades ago with a Zen practice with Thich Nhat Hanh, the notion of enlightenment was very straightforward. Thai would say, enlightenment is all it is perceiving things as they truly are. Thai had a way of boiling everything down to this. He didn't have a vocabulary, because he's Vietnamese, and then he learned French, and I think English was, his fourth or fifth language, and so he didn't have the huge vocabulary. So it always, but it actually, I think it was helpful, because he would boil things down to these very simple and easy to understand nuggets of truth. Enlightenment is straightforward. It's simply perceiving things as they truly are. So enlightenment is seeing reality without misperception. In that tradition, the Thai's Zen tradition conveyed to me that true enlightenment involves seeing things as they are, free from the veils of our clouded minds, free from the ideas, beliefs, and perceptions, distorted perceptions that are fueled by this egoic sense of self and this identification with the egoic self. And this really resonated with me because it made practical sense. I'd read lots of books, but it suggested that enlightenment wasn't some abstract or mystical unreachable state. Rather, it was about experiencing a shift in perception. So it was moving from viewing things through the haze of the mind, of distorted ideas and beliefs, to seeing things unfiltered in their true essence. Right? This is why we spend some time talking about beginner's mind or don't know mind. We're seeing beyond all these thoughts and ideas and beliefs, to this kind of unfiltered, bare essence of what's in front of us. And as I underwent some shifts in perception, it became clear that there was indeed an entirely different way of perceiving reality. So it went from understanding it theoretically to experiencing it firsthand. And what really became apparent in working with Thich Nhat Hanh was that our conventional way of perceiving what we consider really normal is in fact a misperception. It's a distorted lens. Oh, the other thing that ChatGPT says is it arises due to dualistic thinking. How could I forget that one? Right, which is really how our minds work. Everything's categorized and then is a duality. So that's why our minds can't comprehend reality, because it thinks dualistically. And dualistic thinking is quite natural, right? It evolved as a survival mechanism, really, a way for humans to survive. It's the nature of the brain, the nature of language. You could say the nature of ego preservation. It's the way the ego survives. This thing that we're trying to see beyond, the mind is actually wired to see life in that way. So there's a strong pull to think dualistically. There's nothing wrong with it. It's quite natural. But we can shift our perceptions and see things as they truly are. We can shift. We call this a realization, this moment of awakening where we no longer misperceive reality. But it's really not a realization in a conventional sense. It's not coming upon a new piece of information. It's not a scientific discovery in the normal conventional way that we use those terms. The term realize implies a conscious act of uncovering something that was previously unknown, previously unseen. So it doesn't involve any gaining of new information. It's simply a shift in perception. So that's really important to get that, because books give us a lot of information. Talks like this give us some information, but really, what's important to come away with from a talk like this is that it's the practice in shifting, having this profound shift in perception. So the shift doesn't come from acquiring more facts and reading more books and listening to, hundreds of Dharma talks on Dharma Seed or YouTube or wherever. It requires shedding things, not picking up things. We're really shedding, letting go of layers and layers of pre-existing conditioning, pre-existing information. Shifting out of, having all this knowledge that we think is going to get us there and going right back to don't know mind, beginner's mind, letting go of how we think what we should do to get there. That's why my meditations start to all sound the same, right? We're resting in the still silence, and I don't know. I keep trying to figure out new ways to say the same thing, but really, that's, if you can just spend more of your day doing that, excuse me, if you could just spend more of your day doing that, resting in the still, silent awareness, that's where we're unearthing something new. Well, it's not even unearthing something new. It's really the removal of mental clutter and conditioning that obstructs a clear view. Diva negativa. It's removing layers and layers of what we think we know. Or in the Buddha with the 5 aggregates, seeing that we're not these things that we presume ourselves to be. So we're really removing a lot of clutter and conditioning that obstructs reality. And when this happens, there's a perceptual shift that occurs, a transformation in how things are perceived. And this change doesn't alter the appearance of objects, right? A tree remains a tree, a house remains a house. You don't suddenly see something else. What changes is the light in which these things are seen. So we shift from perceiving through the lens of conditioned thoughts and ideas and beliefs to a direct, unfiltered perception of reality. So you could say enlightenment is this transition from the constraints of conditioned consciousness, or what I often called egoic mind, to unconditioned consciousness, seeing beyond the distortions created by our own minds and perceiving things as they truly are. So we not only see the external, we not only see the tree, the house, but we also recognize its essence without any filters, mental conditioning. So it's kind of a direct and profound apprehension of reality. And this is basically what awakening or enlightenment is.